Hi, everybody. Welcome to the DogCo Secrets podcast. I am Michelle Kline. I am the host of this podcast and the founder of DogCo Launch, where I help pet care companies grow and scale. Today, we are going to be talking about scaling frameworks for your pet care business and where you may find yourself stuck depending on the size, the team size, and the revenue point that your business is at. So let's get into it. I'm really curious at how this episode is going to turn out because normally I have this beautiful outline where I really outline all the talking points I want to hit, really think through my thoughts on it. And I don't know, this one, I just had this feeling of like, you know what? I think I'm just going to have to talk through this out loud, see where we end up. So we'll see. I may not do this format again if we get really stuck and we are unable to find our way forward. So I have been working professionally in the pet care industry now in the pet care industry broadly, like 8 years, and as a coach consultant for this is my third year. And I have been busy. I have worked with about 200 companies in that time, across all different sizes of business. I have worked with some solos all the way up to, I'm known for working with teams, which is why I phrased it that way, but I have worked with some solos. I have worked with 7-figure plus businesses and everything in between. And as I've been doing that, I have this thought process starting to shape up in my mind of things that you might commonly see depending on the phase that your business is at, like the biggest bottlenecks that you might come across when you are looking to get to the next level. This came up also I was doing a consultation for my mastermind, which by the time this episode drops, we will be up and going. So if you missed it, stay tuned. I have a lot more coming for that later this year, a lot of really exciting things that I would love to stay in touch with you on. But I was doing a consultation today for a company considering joining, and the owner asked me a really good question, and it was some version of companies that aren't ready but join anyways. How do you see that play out for them? What are the common things that you hear them say they weren't ready for or it was too early for? And it really got my mind. I thought it was a fabulous question, and it really got my mind going on what are the most common bottlenecks? What are the most common reasons that a company maybe doesn't get to the next level or where they get stuck? If you're a pet care business that wants to level up, then this is for you. The DogCo Business Summit is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, September 26th to the 28th. We still have tickets available, and we just announced that we are going digital. So you can get your in-person ticket or your digital ticket at dogcosummit.com. And then I thought about it all day, and then I tried to write an outline for a podcast, and now I'm just going to talk through it because your girl is a verbal processor. So it is what it is. So I've worked with about 200 companies now, a little over 200 actually. And through my work, I've been seeing more and more patterns. And I also have experienced a lot of these patterns from when I was scaling my company specifically. So in the beginning, there is a solopreneur. Many people in this industry actually enter into their businesses as a solopreneur, maybe doing this part-time, friends and family, maybe starting on an app, or they just had people that they were pet sitting for, maybe they had through college. That was my story personally. I opened my pet care business when I was a graduate student. I was getting my degree in social work, and all day long I was doing really, really hard things and decided that puppies would be the perfect complement, just the perfect balance to everything hard and difficult about social work. Next thing I know, as the story goes, we are growing and I'm bringing on team members, and my CPA is telling me to convert to employees. And so I do, because I did not know what that meant at the time. So just growing. And in that window of time, so from the companies that I have worked with, that solopreneur phase, it's different for everyone. I think it also kind of depends on if you came in, how comfortable you are with the idea of hiring, if you came into your business with the hope to hire at some point. But I tend to see solopreneurs kind of anywhere between $0 in revenue all the way up to I had one solopreneur that I worked with who was doing about 120K as a solopreneur. I'm not sure even they would advocate for the schedule that they were running. I think they had taken on a lot of clients and it had kind of snowballed. They have since hired. Typically, I see solopreneurs starting to bring on staff. It kind of depends on what you need for your personal take-home pay, but starting to bring people on between like 30 and 40, 30 and $45,000 annually in revenue. At that point, you're pretty busy. You're doing a decently high appointment volume, just you. Probably starting to think through, okay, what does it look like if I get sick? Or what if I want to take a vacation? Maybe you have too much coming in than you can handle personally. And so you start looking at bringing on help. Initially, when a solopreneur, from what I've observed at least, brings on a team member, they tend to bring on someone that they can give the overflow of their own work to, rather than bringing on, and this is a really pivotal moment. I haven't really thought about this before. See, this is why we're out loud processing. I love it. All right, so typically what I see a company do in this phase is the owner wants to retain their income earning capacity as they have been. So they bring on someone that they're going to pass the excess to. And what this does is entrench the owner, the solopreneur, deeper into field work for longer. Now, for some people, that is fine, that they want to stay in the field. They want to be deeply like field driven as their role in the business. But there are many others that as you start hiring, your administrative load is going to start really escalating very quickly, who want to exit that season of the business. That was me. Once I started hiring, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to figure out how to remove myself out of the field. Now, one of the ways to do that more quickly is to reverse the position that I was talking about before. So what a lot of people do is I'm the core service provider as a solopreneur. I'm going to bring on, and I'm going to get to big companies. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I already have staff, hang on. We're going to get there. This is the journey, the evolution of the business. So solopreneur, quickest way to escape that season is actually to reverse that dynamic. Treat whoever you hire as the priority for filling their schedule. You take the overflow. This is how I grew my pet care business. Because I started bringing on staff while I was still in graduate school and my course load was picking up because I didn't know, none of this was intentional. Like I didn't know anything at the time, but my course load was picking up and I knew I needed help and I was needing to step back into my education a bit more. So I was just like hiring people, loading them up, and then just kind of I was dancing around the schedule, taking whatever they couldn't take. And what I didn't realize at the time is that that actually escalated a lot of growth in my business because one, it let me kind of hold the margin in that season for the business and take the excess and say yes to the excess. Versus if you're the core provider and you really stack your schedule full and then use other people as the overflow, you're kind of at the whim of what they want to say yes to, especially if they're not incredibly consistent people yet for you. Like they don't have a consistent schedule or a consistent like client load. They're going to be much more just kind of ad hoc. And that may not actually help you as much as it feels like it will when you bring that person on. But that's going to be that tension in the solopreneur and first couple of hires, that 0 to 100,000-ish. Now, if you're hearing that number and you're like, I'm way under that when I started hiring, or maybe I'm way over that, it's an approximate number, but just, it's an example. But 0 to 100-ish, those first couple of hires, I found that to be a season. So I tell people, look, if you're looking to grow a team, try and get past your first 5 hires as quickly as you can, because you're going to feel incredibly bottlenecked between your time, your commitments, what the field needs, and who you have on your team. And I find that to be really true for companies, honestly, between 5 to 7 hires. At 7 hires, it seems that there's something that kind of loosens up. It depends on your model, of course. But you tend to have enough people on your team that someone has a little bit of excess that you can work with. Not always, but often, depending on your service volume. So getting to that 150K in revenue, that 160, I actually found that operationally things opened up a bit more after that because I just had enough in the machine to be able to step out of it a little bit more. Up until about 150 in revenue, 150,000 annually, I was in the field a good bit, and not for like desire. I'd have somebody quit. I didn't have other people on my team who could fill in, and there was a lot of just kind of this like seesaw feeling on my schedule. So in this phase, 5 to 7 hires, maybe somewhere between 100 and 200,000 in revenue. If they're part-time, if you have people that are doing really high hours for you, you may be slightly higher at that team size, or if you have a lot of really part-time people, you may be lower. But you're probably doing pretty much everything, especially administratively. This is going to be a season where you are just kind of all hands on deck in all roles of the business, usually. So payroll, may or may not have a bookkeeper that's kind of sorting your books out, which can be true at many levels of the business. But I think especially I didn't hire a bookkeeper until I was probably at 250,000. I needed one before then. I was very overwhelmed by it, but just didn't feel I had the excess margin, attention, money, anything like that. So this is going to be a season that requires you in a lot of capacities with your business. I tried to get past this season as quickly as possible because I knew that I wanted a little bit more margin for my time, and at this point to also take home the take home pay that I wanted, it required me to still be in the field a decent bit. So I made it my mission. I was going to break 200,000 as quickly as I could because the way the numbers were organized, my profit margin, etc., that was kind of the number to where I'd be able to do the take-home pay that I wanted. My goal was 50,000, 25% profit margin, with not being in the field. So that was like the number that I had set my heart on, set my sights on. Breaking 200,000, my team was at probably 10 to 11 people. I had finally gotten to the point where I could be out of the field. We were growing more sustainably. And I would categorize this window for your business, that 200 to 300,000. You're starting to implement your first structure, starting to think about SOPs. Maybe you have some of them before then, but oftentimes when I'm working with a company in this phase, that this is kind of the part where it starts to feel a little messy and a little chaotic. Well, it's felt chaotic the whole time. Let's be honest. It's business ownership. It's all chaos. But that 200 to 300,000 mark is where we start to really see the need for systems and may start to realize some pretty big gaps in our business where we don't have them, start to get kind of uncomfortable with the volume and the lack of systems. I know for me, that was a feeling I had of just feeling like, man, this is becoming quite the beast, and it needs a little bit more structure to it, both in order for it to operate well, but also for it to operate safely. At around 200 to 300,000, you're doing a decent volume. Like that's a lot of dog walks. It's a lot of pet sits. At this revenue point, you might be starting to bring on some admin work, maybe a few hours a week, maybe starting to look at like a trainer role to help train new team members. You may have this earlier. This is probably the revenue point where it starts to feel a little bit more comfortable to financially invest in it, depending on how your numbers and your labor is set up. I really hope this podcast makes sense. I feel like it does, but we'll see. Again, give me feedback on this one. I'd really love feedback on this one. Like drop a comment, tag me on Facebook, send me a DM, let me know if it didn't or it did. Either way. All right, so once we get to 300 to 500,000, that is when we really start moving and really have to focus on that operational development. So before 300,000, you could probably get away with more minor systems in place, maybe just a couple SOPs. If you have talented team members and you don't have a lot of turnover, you may not be feeling quite the pain point. Between 300 and 500,000, we have to start looking at some real structure for your business. Ideally, maybe you got to that earlier than this season. This is the window where you start to have it for your business to continue growing. So that operational development is going to be a huge bottleneck here when we don't have that in place. So we need some real structure. We also want to focus on getting more repeatable marketing in place. Oftentimes in the first kind of season of growth in the business, you're very close to your clients. It's not very easy, but it's easier to solicit warm referrals. They know you personally. But once we get to this size of the business, you're probably not quite as involved with every client. I would encourage you to be stepping back from that a little bit, facilitating your team or maybe a middle management tier to be handling a lot of the client relationships, a lot of the administrative work. We want to get the systems in place so it doesn't revolve around you. It's not uncommon that I would say I tend to, well, actually that's changing a lot. I was about to say I tend to intersect with companies in the $300,000 to $500,000 range. I've worked with companies all over the spectrum of this, so I don't know that I have a clear intersection point for DogCo at this point in time, but it's not uncommon that when I do intersect with a company between 300 and 500,000, if they have a lack of systems, if they don't have administrative support for the owner tends to be struggling with a good bit of burnout from what I see. Maybe we're really overwhelmed. We maybe haven't been able to take a vacation in quite a while. We've probably been at the business for a decent length of time. And that will really start to wear on you without that infrastructure, those SOPs, more repeatable marketing so you can hand it off to other people. We want to focus on really solidifying your brand. Those are all things that I would recommend in this chunk of the business. Really focusing on that middle management help. You may or may not be looking at a full-time position at this point in time to help support the business, but you most likely are putting people in place for helping run the day-to-day, helping run all of the administrative noise. If you don't have a bookkeeper at this point, I highly recommend that's an investment we're making, because there's a lot more money flowing around here, and we want to make sure that that is something that has support and is well organized. We want to know exactly how much is in your business and where it's going. 500,000 to 750,000 is kind of the next category I would put in place, or I would categorize. This is going to be companies, at least from what I've observed. And I would say 500,000 to 100,000 plus, I'm actively studying. So I'm like, what makes y'all tick? What are the pain points? Where do we need more support and resources? But from what I've observed so far, 500,000 to 750, we're probably getting to the point where we need full-time help in the business, maybe a full-time manager, full-time GM. We are most likely really escalating with the lead flow, or attempting to, because we actually have the processes in place to more quickly onboard. If you don't, you're probably feeling the pain point of that because you have enough market fit and enough market saturation that you probably just organically are starting to get more leads. People know about you, and their neighbor uses you, their friend uses you, and you're just starting to get more and more of those connections. And so I would say one of the biggest bottlenecks, we need to have a way to onboard clients that's not bottlenecked around your time. From what I've seen up until, it depends on the business. Some people take this transition way earlier, but you may not have handed off client onboarding and meet and greets yet. At this part in the business life cycle, the business journey, I would be heavily advocating for that, because otherwise the lead flow is really going to start as your time allows. And it's also just going to take a lot of your time. Growing, scaling very quickly, we have to figure out how to onboard clients more quickly and not just with your time. At this point in the business, I also would recommend we are heavily focused on making a very clear process for your client experience. That would be important before now, but here is where that's really what's going to let your business continue to escalate to this next revenue point is when you have gotten more and more skilled at keeping clients as well as adding new ones rather than focusing predominantly on new client lead flow. And then from what I am observing, learning, and just getting to generally participate in the industry right now, that 750 to a million in revenue annually is going to be really figuring out your long-term management structure. So every phase that you go through, it's going to require this reconfiguration of people, roles, responsibilities. Your SOPs are going to need to grow with the business to really capture how to actually do things. Every revenue level is going to kind of break your systems a little bit, and then we have to go back in and tweak them. But at 750 to a million, from what I'm observing, that tends to be where we have to get much more intentional about what is the operational structure that's actually going to debottleneck the business and continue to let it grow. And that can be real tricky because at this point you may have like a bunch of part-time people kind of surrounding your management tier. You may have people who their capacity hasn't grown as the revenue of the business has. And that can be a real pain point. And then at this point too, we're still focusing on lead flow. That's always going to be a thing. We probably have pretty good brand recognition in the community, but it still always has to be a priority. We want to make sure that our brand positioning is in alignment with the target services that we want, and also that we're continuing to have a really high client experience, especially as the owner gets further and further removed. Because if you're doing $1 million in revenue, it's very difficult to have your hand in the client experience with every client. So it's going to be incredibly important that that is very well systematized and that is something that has been really thought through. Clients have a very repeatable experience, and that has grown well with the business. These are frameworks that, one, are still clearly very much developing. I would really like to get more clear on the bottlenecks in every phase, as well as like what are the key things you have to do to move from one phase to the other. But these are just very candid, open thoughts on what I think about at 2 a.m. when I can't sleep. So I would love feedback on this episode. I'd love to know if this was helpful, if this content resonated, and if you would like to see more on scaling frameworks. So reach out and let me know. And cheering you on, guys. Keep going.